The Miami Dolphins had joint practice in Chicago with the Bears, and from the sounds of it, things were a little rough. We're going to talk about it here today on Locked On Dolphins.
You are Locked On Dolphins, your daily Miami Dolphins podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, Miami, welcome to another episode of Locked On Dolphins. It is your team every day here on the Locked On Network. I'm your host, Kyle Krabs, a lifelong Miami Dolphins fan, host of Locked On Dolphins, co-host of Locked On NFL Scouting, author of Touchdown Miami on Substack, NFL staff writer for A to Z Sports. Want to give a special welcome and shout out to our everydayers because it is your team every day. We don't just say it, we live it. You're on the Locked On Network. Today on the show, we're getting into joint practice with the Bears. The things that I'm interested in finding out more about in particular, because I obviously was not there. So I did not watch practice. I do not have practice observations about Jordyn Brooks picking off Caleb Williams in the first rep of 11 on 11, or Tua throwing 3 interceptions, one of them to Chris Myrick, the other one off the hands of Tyreek Black, and the other one in the low red zone in the team period on a pass attempt to Tanner Conner. Like, I don't know if Tua put the ball in the wrong spot. I don't know if Tanner runs the wrong route. I don't know what the miscommunication was with Chris Myrick. I don't know. I don't know why Deo Odinyango put Patrick Paul on a power rush on the ground in the first rep of 1v1s. I don't know why Montez Sweat didn't have a very active day, and the Dolphins apparently blocked him quite well throughout the course of practice. I don't know who wasn't winning their reps against press coverage. I know Tyreek Hill didn't participate. Mike McDaniel told us what he's working through. I know Jalen Waddle had a screen attempt where Tyreek Stevenson blew him up and shook him up, and he missed a team period. So the Dolphins, without Jalen Waddle and Tyreek Hill, going against these press receivers, if it's Nick Westbrook-Ikhine, Malik Washington, and D. Eskridge, yeah, I'd imagine you're going to get a good amount of press on them, right? I will give the Bears, from all of the reports, tip the cap to the Bears. They had a very physical practice. I know they've been doing a lot of full tackling periods on their own with their own practices. Chicago brought the wood today. Chicago brought the intensity today. It sounds like both defenses had a lot to feel good about. It sounds like both offenses had some stuff to work with. That's kind of the 411 on practice, and just giving you guys the spark notes from those who were in attendance on both the Chicago side of things and the Miami side of things. It's one of the nice thing about the joint practices is I like getting the contrasting viewpoints from both beat reports and the people that are on both sides of the fence, just to kind of paint as rosy of a picture as you can from a high resolution standpoint of what actually happened versus people that cover just Miami or people that cover just Chicago, right? It sounds like the Dolphins defensively, their corners struggled in the first one-on-one period. And that's exactly what we talked about yesterday with kind of the practice dynamics that were taking place. Is that's not the environment and the situation in which those guys are going to have a lot of success. It sounds like Olamide Zaccheaus had a lot of success for Chicago today individually. But the Dolphins, once they went to team periods, had tightened the screws much more defensively as compared to, hey, everybody's on an island. Hey, you're doing one-on-one with the entire field to cover. As reported, Dolphins had a lot of flags in that period. So that element of practice went exactly as you would have guessed, looking at Chicago's depth chart at wide receiver and Miami's individual talent depth chart at the quarterback positions. Not a winning formula. We also talked about Colston Loveland and the matchup there. And against two young safeties that Miami had, he had a long catch down the field for an explosive play. So that element, I appreciated seeing the names that were attached, and it was not Minka Fitzpatrick and Ife Melifonwu or Elijah Campbell. There's the young guys on the roster at safety that gave up that chunk. So I think there were some elements of this practice that you looked at the strengths and weaknesses of both sides, and you would not have been surprised to hear the end results being what they were. Sounds like the Dolphins really got after with some of this simulated pressure stuff for Caleb Williams. They kind of got after him. It sounds like they were able to manipulate some protections, and that's a young quarterback with a new offensive system. His ability to feel where pressure's coming. There's this whole Anthony Richardson thing going on Twitter. If you haven't been living on Twitter, first of all, I'm envious of you these days. But Richardson had a injury that he suffered, a dislocated pinky in the Thursday night preseason contest against the Ravens. And it was an empty 5-man protection. And they had the center turning to the left, and the Ravens brought 3 rushers to the right. So the tackle, the guard blocks the defensive tackle that's shaded on one of his shoulders. And then you had an off-ball linebacker that was head up over the tackle and an outside pass rusher that was lined up outside. And they both came on the pressure. Well, the tackle has to sort, it's you're on the man side. You have to take the most dangerous player. And in instances like that in pass protection, quarterback's hot, right? Like they brought more to this side than what we had allocated with our call pre-snap. You as the quarterback, the 6th player is now your responsibility. And you had a tight end run a hook, and you had a running back run a swing. And they both had their eyes back immediately, and they're ready for the ball. And Anthony didn't look to this side of the field at all, right? He stayed over here. He liked what he thought he was going to get over here, and he thought the nickel might have come, and the nickel didn't come, so he thought he had time. And he got earholed with a really ugly play. And this is all relevant for the Dolphins because Anthony Richardson, potentially the starting quarterback for the Colts in week 1 against the Dolphins, and the Dolphins run a simulated pressure scheme. So knowing these kinds of things is helpful and somewhat Dolphins pertinent. But anyway, Richardson said after the game, I have to check and confirm on the backside and make sure I'm not hot. I didn't do that, and I got earholed and dislocated my pinky. And people on the timeline today have been arguing with NFL quarterbacks, including Pro Football Hall of Famers like Kurt Warner, who were like, yeah, Anthony should have checked the protection there. Anthony himself said, yeah, I should have checked the protection there. And people are still like, no, the running back should have blocked. But that's not Dolphins practice. But that's the kinds of games that the Dolphins played with Caleb Williams as far as who's coming from where. And that's something that Minkah Fitzpatrick's talked about that he really likes about the Anthony Weaver defense is we can come and get you from any different number of places. And it's a matter of, it doesn't matter whether you're in base or you're in nickel or whether you're in big nickel or whether you're in dime. It's the positions on the chalkboard, and you can provide the same kind of look and do a lot of different things out of it, or you can provide a lot of different looks to do the same thing. And so to hear that the Dolphins had that kind of ability to attack Chicago from a pass protection standpoint is something that I would have guessed as well. Now, Chicago and their corners playing as physical as they were and disrupting the timing. If you knew Jalen Waddle was going to miss a team period, and if you knew that Tyreek Hill was not going to practice, I wouldn't have been overly surprised by that either. It sounded like the run game had some really promising surge, particularly to the left side with the Savaitanai and Patrick Paul combination on that side and getting some chunk runs. But it sounded like everything offensively was herky-jerky, a lot of self-inflicted wounds offensively, procedural stuff, false starts. Kind of the same, some of the same things, right? And you go on the road. Cam Good had a block punt, so that was cool. But all things considered, Chicago's defense certainly outmuscled and outbested the Dolphins, particularly on the perimeter, and interrupted the timing. Now, am I going to sit here and freak out? My timeline's in a nuclear meltdown mode because the Bears kicked the Dolphins' butt with their physicality. Well, they're not really game planning, right? For all you know, you wanted the Dolphins receiver. You knew that Chicago was going to play physical and say, hey, we want to give all these guys a chance to beat press. Now, it's a big-time test because whoever is that third receiver, when the chips are down and you're playing, and if teams are going to shade and cloud and put safeties over top and press against both Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle, and you're the third receiver, and you're going to live in that world and they're going to play in your face, you got to win the one-on-one. You have to win the one-on-one because you got all the space in the world. If you win the rep early, you're going to get the football. based on they're going to cloud up top over 10 and 17 and then play safeties over the top. That's 4 defenders allocated into to the spacing of two routes. This is the Braxton Berrios. This is why he went out and got the Odell Beckham last year, with that school of thought being, hey, you need the third receiver to be a guy who can beat some man coverage. Well, they didn't get it last year. So it's still a really helpful rep, and working that's useful. And it didn't sound like anybody was up to the task today. So it's a storyline I'm going to watch moving forward. But no, I'm not a nuclear meltdown because I don't know what the objective was of practice. I wasn't there either. So I'm not in the install to understand, here's what we're going to try to achieve today. I didn't see the practice itself, but I hear the reports. So some more thoughts on things that I'm looking for out of practice going forward, like what becomes a trend, because I think that's when you can start to kind of latch on to things. That's next here on Locked On Dolphins. Make sure you guys stick with us. Ever wish managing your money felt easier? With Monarch Money, it can. Whether you're growing your life savings or planning a big purchase, Monarch puts you in the driver's seat. It's like having your own personal CFO, giving you full visibility control over all of your finances. Monarch Money is more than just a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending all in one place. So in addition to managing your money, you're also building your wealth. Perhaps it's easier for you to see everything laid out and realize where you can cut and make more efficient decisions. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNFL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNFL for half off of your first year. Today's episode of Locked On Dolphins is presented by Yahoo Fantasy. It is the best time of year. NFL kickoff is almost here, and that means fantasy football season is back in full swing. This year, Yahoo Fantasy is turning things up with fantasy football experience. It's unlike any one before. This year, me and Locked On Dolphins are playing Yahoo Fantasy, and you should too, whether you're a first-timer or a veteran joining your millionth league. Celebrate 28 years of fantasy football greatness. Yahoo Fantasy is dropping 28 big new features throughout 28 days in the month of August. To kick it off, they just dropped Yahoo Fantasy Guillotine Leagues, a killer new way to play fantasy football on Yahoo, where the lowest scoring team each week gets eliminated until there is just one team left standing. With the season around the corner, now is the time to get your league together and give this new mode a try. If you're more into the classics, you could still play head-to-head private leagues or join a public league. Stay tuned for more killer announcements and start playing Yahoo Fantasy Football now at yahoofantasy.com/LockedOnNFL. I think the non-Jalen Waddle, Tyreek Hill receivers and their play against press coverage is a storyline that can become a concerning one. I think that's totally fair. Am I going to overreact to it here on Friday, August 8th, after one sampling of it against one team? No, I'm not. I refuse to do that. I'm not. I need a bigger sample size before I get anxious, right? And you're always evaluating, and you want to collect more information, but not overreact to small bits of information. But it's a note in my notepad that it's like, okay, how do you handle this week over week moving forward? And there's things you can do schematically to create free releases, whether that's bunches and stacks and motion. And I don't know what the Dolphins were or were not doing with a lot of that kind of stuff today. I don't know. I was not there. So I'm not going to freak out about it, right? And knowing full well you can game plan for some of this kind of stuff, you can have answers for it. So no, I'm not hitting the panic button, but it is a bullet point for sure. Malik Washington, Nick Westbrook-Ikine, Taj Washington, D. Eskridge. Eyes on you guys. Theo Weiss, Andrew Armstrong. Who can beat press coverage? I want to know. Because that's going to be an important piece of the puzzle when it's all said and done. I think the other big storyline that I'm watching is the Jordyn Brooks dust up. So there was a scrap between Chicago and Miami, but there was also a scrap between Jordyn Brooks and somebody else on the Dolphins defense. And I don't know the context. I don't think anybody that was there was able to get a confirmation on who the other player was. But Jordyn Brooks apparently was really heated with one of his own teammates. And I know Minkah Fitzpatrick spoke after practice today. And he said Jordyn Brooks was holding his teammates to a higher standard. And as a leader, when you want to elevate the standard, it can be tough at times. It can be confrontational at times, but it's necessary. And that's something to watch because Jordyn Brooks, I applaud Jordyn Brooks. I don't know what the circumstances were that prompted. Was somebody playing recklessly and almost hurt a teammate for no reason? Was somebody loafing? Did somebody not communicate the way that they needed to? Did somebody take exception to something that was said to try to have a conversation? Again, I don't know. And you're obviously in the heat of the moment, and the Dolphins defense had a lot of nice things that it can look back on, and I'm sure they have a lot of corrections to make just based off of the practice and going into the preseason game, and we'll see who ends up playing. Mike McDaniel was kind of mum on that, but besides saying he wanted to get his starters some opportunities to play. But if those confrontations, I appreciate that it happens in the moment, right? Because the feedback from last year was too much got swept under the rug last year. Too much was let to linger and not enough direct conversation and communication, right? To the point where you had different players that were veterans from different places. And you kind of had this leadership vacuum with veterans from different spots that were really long in the tooth and well experienced. And how do you handle confrontation? How do you handle getting on the same page? Who's the leader of a group? That was one of the bits of feedback as you kind of parse through everybody's comments at the end of the year and throughout the offseason and some of the things that I've heard that went on behind the scenes. That was something that created some of what Teron Armstead was talking about with that conflict and confrontation. That was a part of the roller coaster ride of last year. And I know there was one incident in the early chapters of the season where the leaders kind of got the team together. It was like, look, like we got to be able to talk to each other and figure out how to make corrections and get on the same page here. So if that was the critique from last year, I appreciate Jordyn Brooks being direct in a moment to enforce this standard. I wish I knew more about it. And it's something I'm going to watch moving forward. When I have opportunities to observe this football team, I'm going to be looking for like body language stuff and effort and pursuit and communication and communication after plays, in addition to pre-snap communication, because that's the kind of stuff that if those confrontations are going to be worth it, you're not going to continue to have them. If you're going to continue to have them, then the question becomes, is there a common thread between who they're happening with? And that's what makes me wish I knew more about that incident, but nobody that was even there from a beat perspective. I mean, I heard from a few of the guys that were there watching the practice, and they talked about how the sightlines were brutal in Chicago. It was not a great layout to be able to see effectively a lot of what was happening. And then you have 2 fields worth of stuff going on at the same time. But what I did hear was Jordyn Brooks was hot, like really hot. So that's something that I care about is what was he upset about? I don't know. But it is a storyline out of practice that I have questions about. And it's obviously for a team that is talking about camaraderie and getting on the same page. I understand if that's what you hear about the Dolphins, and then you hear, hey, a couple of Dolphins defenders got into it, you'd probably say, well, that doesn't sound good. That doesn't sound like what they were trying to do is working. They're talking about trying to change the culture, and here they are, and they're getting after each other and enjoying practice. But I also know a part of it was you didn't have enough direct conversation. You didn't have enough guys that were man enough to look each other in the eye and have conversations when they disagreed with each other. So I applaud that piece of it for Jordyn Brooks. For sure, I do. But if it continues, it could be a concerning development for the Dolphins in this season. We're talking about the walking wounded and the cap sitch on the other side of the break. That's coming your way next. Make sure you guys stick with us. It's time to fuel up and turn it up with 5-Hour Energy Transfusion. It brings the bold grape, ginger, and lime flavor of your favorite golf drink minus the alcohol into a quick, energizing shot. Whether you're sinking birdies on the green or making memories with friends, this is a hole-in-one for your energy game. Let's be honest, some days on or off the course might need a little extra kick in the pants, and 5-Hour Energy can do exactly that. If you go to 5hourenergy.com today, that's the number 5hourenergy.com, you can use promo code LOCKEDONGolf to receive 20% off your order. This is only valid until September 30th on one order and cannot be used with other promotions. The code is not good on subscription orders. Whether you're meeting up with friends or trying to turn 18 holes into 36, get the energizing boost you need to power through. Order transfusion-flavored 5-Hour Energy shots today. So the walking wounded. I went a little longer there than I expected to in segment 2 on the things I'm looking for moving forward out of this practice because I don't want to overreact to a singular practice. Jack Jones went off, had a coverage rep in the red zone. Teron Armstead, of all people, was at practice today and carried him off the field. Then he was on a cart and everybody was losing their minds about that. Somebody told me they saw him with some fluids. He was smiling on the cart. And then he went on Twitter and said he had a cramp. It was just cramps. So crisis averted with Jack Jones. There was a stretch of time where Jonah Savaianaya, they couldn't find, and Keon Smith went in for him at left guard. Sounds like Jonah is fine as well. Turned out he was just elsewhere on the field, and I don't know whether that was because they subbed him out or they wanted to get Keon Smith reps or if he had a minor thing, but nothing serious with Jonah Savaianaya in the midst of they were playing Where's Waldo with him at practice today. Tyreek Hill, Mike McDaniel spoke in the pre-practice press opportunity and disclosed that he has an oblique that he's tried to work through, and they want to let it cool down so it's not something that lingers. So they've kind of reined him in a little bit, but that's not considered to be a serious injury either. So you've got a Tyreek Hill update with an oblique. You got Jack Jones with cramps. You have Jonah Savaianaya, where there was some concern about, hey, we can't find him. Did they take him off the field? No, he was just elsewhere on the field, off to the side. So he's fine. So that's your walking wounded update for the Dolphins coming out of this joint practice. And obviously the next hurdle is who plays in the preseason 1 game. The Dolphins' next practice will be Tuesday of next week. They obviously have the game in between on Sunday at 1:00. And they have joint practices on Wednesday and Thursday, off Friday, preseason 2 on Saturday. So we'll see as far as the intensity. We'll see what kind of intensity the Dolphins ultimately bring to the game on Sunday for those who do suit up. We'll see what kind of intensity we get in the joint practices against Detroit next week. But it was something where the Dolphins kind of shell-shocked early in that practice, and then it evened out a little bit, but Chicago still had a physicality edge against the Dolphins offense, and the Dolphins had their own self-inflicted wounds, and they had some success running the ball, and they had some chunk plays, but the consistency of it was just not an efficient practice, even after they kind of buckled down a little bit. And then they had some errors. I know the second interception was a ball off of Tyreek Black's hands that Jaquan Brisker makes a diving interception on. So, it's the receivers got to make the plays too. Am I going to lose sleep because Jaquan Brisker intercepted a Tua Tagovailoa pass on a ball that went off of Tyreek Black's hands where he didn't catch the ball? Not really. But won't stop the 3 interception posts on the internet and this, that, and the other thing. But it is what it is. I want to get into the cap sitch because we did get some clarity on a couple of the Dolphins contracts for veteran players that they've added to the mix. And I thought it was particularly interesting to find out that those two veteran corners that this team had, Mike Hilton and Jack Jones, those guys are indeed both on the books as minimum salary players. That was eye-opening to me. Jack Jones is on the books this year for $1.1 million. That is minimum salary for his league tenure, and he has no monies in guarantees. Mike Hilton looks like he got the veteran salary veteran benefit salary, where he's getting minimum salary and then $167,500 in signing bonus, but he's only going on the books against the salary cap for $1.19 million. And that's incentive for once you get outside of your rookie contract window, you can pay a minimum salary to a veteran, but take a smaller percentage of it against the cap. So teams have an incentive to continue employing non-first 4 years in the league type of players before their tenure makes them too expensive, and then teams don't want to pay them. So that was eye-opening to me. That the Dolphins managed to get both Mike Hilton and Jack Jones on minimum salaries. Now, you can make a judgment on what that means for both of those players, that was the kind of market that they had. And it's fair to question. I know what Jack Jones's tape looked like last year. I know it was up and down. I know he didn't play in a particularly good defense. And I know that he had some overly aggressive stuff that you have to break him of. But I know what the talent looks like. And I know from just a talent perspective, I know at this stage, he's in year 4. Like, he's not a minimum salary talent. There's questions and risk, and that's why he was available. Just like Mike Hilton. I know Mike Hilton wasn't a minimum salary player, but there's diminishing appeal for a nickel exclusive player, and his career to this point has been almost exclusively in the nickel. Who's on the wrong side of 30. So I understand why these guys are available, but I think watching both of their film, I'm inclined to believe that they both have things left in the tank and can make strong contributions. And it sounded like Jack Jones made a number of big plays today at practice before the cramp took him off the field and scared everybody half to death. So that's the cap situation. I'm still waiting on the Zach Sealer official terms to kind of figure out like what the cap situation looks like, what the Dolphins cap space looks like. I know before we get any adjustment for Zach Sealer, the Dolphins are sitting at about, it's between $11.5 and $11.75 million in cap space. So they got a decent amount of, it's their operating cap for the season if they want it to be, plus whatever happens with Zach Sealer. That's going to do it for us here today on the show. Kyle Krabs, you can keep it locked in right here on Locked On Dolphins. It is your team every day. I appreciate you guys as always for checking out the show. Make it a great rest of your day. Enjoy your weekend. We got Dolphins football on Sunday. Look forward to bringing my reaction in the postgame to each and every one of you. You can find it here on your podcast feed or on YouTube, wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. I will be there, and I will see you all then. Go Fins.